For today's episode, we are going to make a hot pad with the quilt as you go method. So I have a soup plate. I'm drawing around it. I want it to be rounded. I'm setting my stitch length to the longest it can be. I am sewing 2 layers of fabric to 2 layers of batting. There's the area I need to cover to make my hot pad. I'm going to the parts and pieces bin. This may not be pretty, but it'll be practical. And I'm laying it out roughly. There's some extra parts and pieces. We all have lots of those lying around. And I'm sewing it down to the batting in strips. Here it is all sewn on. Didn't take very long at all. And you can see the quilting right through on the back because that's what Quilt As You Go does. And oh no! Thank goodness this is a forgiving project. I'll just take an extra piece of my bias binding and sew it right on there. You will never see that hole. It will not be a problem. So there it is. I did some top stitching, and because I did some, I had to do more. I'm trimming it out because it's all ready to go. I have my lovely pot holder with all the layers, so it's a mini quilt. Well, it's not a pot holder. It is a hot pad to sit things on. It does not have Thinsulbrite in, but it does have lots of layers. So I have this binding that is not bias, has very little stretch. Let me show you what would happen. Let me demonstrate what would happen if I used it to put on there. It goes around that curve just fine. But if I were to try to turn it, it would not turn correctly. It would hang up on itself. It just would not work to make the turn. So in this case, where it's a nice curved edge, you need to use bias binding. And I've already shown you my corner, how I pressed it. And I'm pressing it so when I put it in the machine that it's going that way, so I can use my markings on my machine. I'm leaving a little bit of a tail because this is a small project. I am not going to do continuous binding. You can if you want, though. Knock yourself out. So I'm going to start right about there, and I'm going to very slowly sew around. Let me get the camera adjusted so you can enjoy the sounds of the sewing. And away we go. Let me put down that presser foot. You could also clip your binding on. You could use single fold binding at this point also. I like to use double fold when I'm doing a quilt because that's where it gets the most wear and tear. But on this project, it's little. So you could use single fold bias binding. And the reason I am not doing a tutorial on bias binding is that there are so many out there available for you to do. The best one I've seen was one she was making some kind of binding for upholstery and using big upholstery pieces to do that. How do you like that nice bright light? I bought an LED light, and I will caution you, because I bought more than one, this little white machine, even though it's labeled that a light bulb will fit it, they do not always fit the white version. Oh, I see I lost the bobbin race. Hang on a second. Here we go. New bobbin. Not a problem. We pull that thread under the foot, and we will start again. Let me get it lined up on the seam allowance. And I'm going up back about 1/2 inch so that I'm going over those threads and there's no gap. And this project is very forgiving because it's not a show hot pad. Is there such a thing as a show hot pad? I don't know, it could be prettier. This is all scraps, including the batting. And you've seen this bias binding before. It's on a lot of my little boards. And it was on something else that I made to show you, or I pulled it out of that bag of binding. My foot pedal is running away. I could have clipped this on, but sometimes I'm just lazy and want to sew and show. Okay, so now I'm around here to this tail, and I need to be careful. Before I sew over that tail, I need to figure out where to cut it off. So there's where my stitching is. Hang on, let me push the machine back so you can see. There's where my stitching is. And I need to tuck in. I don't want my piece to go past that stitching, so I'm going to go about halfway between where the opening is and where the stitching is. And here's the moment of truth. Heck. So I'm going to peel that back. This is where it starts to be just a little fiddly. But I want it to be straight. I don't want it to, that piece of tail should not be sticking out there. So I'm going to use a pin, kind of coax it. I could also use my stiletto here. Ah, there we go. Tucked in. Everything is tucked. Everything is happy. I'm going to sew around till I get to the end. Oh, that is sticking out. Let me get the stiletto. One of my favorite. There we go. I feel it to make sure there's no big, huge, humongous bump. And I'm going to backstitch there just for fun, since I'm not going to be gentle with it when I turn it over. Let me pull up the needle. Oh, I see. I'm picking up the camera cord again. Okay. Woohoo. So now, when I turn it over, it goes. It rolls up just a little bit. It lets me stretch it and pull it the whole way over. I'm going to hand stitch that down just for fun. Hang on, let me get a needle and thread, and we'll do that right now. If you remember back to the episode on the doll blanket, I did double thread to stitch that down because I wanted it to be sturdy. But this, I don't really care so much one way or the other. It's not, it might be washed quite a bit, but it's not such a big project that I can't repair it, and it's going to be in my house. So I am not starting right here at the joint. I'm going to start down here where I can feel I'm past the bulk. And my goal is to cover that line of stitching where I put it on the front. So I'm going to go in here and take my first stitch. Oh, I'm going to clip that tail. And then I'm just going to do a whip stitch. Somebody commented that they always sew, I think they told me, from right to left. And I'm right-handed. I'm going to take an extra stitch right there, just because that's where I'm starting to hold it down. And I can go up and down, but I tend to go from right to left also. And you'll notice that as I take a stitch, I go in a little bit behind and try to go through pretty much the same hole. Then I come out at the fold. And that's how, it's also how you applique. This is the same stitch. You might do smaller stitches for applique. I don't know. I don't know what the standard stitch length is. Sometimes when I do applique, I do smaller stitches. You don't want to go clear through to the front. You just want to sew right along. Okay, I'm going to tie a new knot back in. I'm going to go under the edge, and then I'm going to come back out. I'm going to make sure my knot's all tucked inside there. Tuck its little tail in, and then I'm going to come back up a little bit past where I tied off and start again. So I'm coming down to the end of it where I'm to the overlap. And before I sew it down, I need to check and make sure that it's got plenty of room and there's nothing sticking out, no weird little gaps. Making sure everything is tucked in just like I did the whole way around. And it is thicker there. I will give you fair warning. Not too much thicker, but it is just a little thicker there. So you might need to take shorter stitches to get it finished off. You might need to put an extra stitch in. Never hurts to put an extra stitch somewhere. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put an extra little stitch there to hold it into place a little better. And I can feel that there's another, where it overlaps, there's 2 extra layers there. I think I'm going to put an extra stitch right there too, where the bulk of it is, just to hold it down fast. And now I only have about 1 inch of binding left to go. So you have seen me do double fold regular binding, straight of grain binding. You have seen me do bias binding. And you can make your own bias binding. Just make sure you watch some video, because I will not do I know I will not make one, because sometimes mine is not always straight and perfect. But there are lots of them out there, because I have watched lots of bias binding videos, or making continuous bias binding videos is what I should say. You need a big table to spread things out on. And it takes time. There's a lot of prep work. That's where the bulk of the work is for making your own
bias binding. And I did read in a book that that was the traditional way to bind all quilts with bias binding. There it is, the last stitch. Woohoo! And it is almost done with that last stitch. Let me tie this off. Now, let me just say, because the next episode is all about labels, and I know this isn't a big quilt, but I am going to mark this one just like it is with the date, because that is the subject of next week's Upskill Monday video. So I'm going to put 2024, and I'm going to sign my name. Now this is a permanent fabric marking pen, so I know it's not going to wash off anytime soon. See you on Monday to talk all about different kinds of fabric labels.
And here it is, the questionable masterpiece of the day, the hot pad.